Well, hi everyone. I'm Bryce Huskett, and thank you very much for joining us today on Market Journal. This past week's weather has us all wishing that spring would be here, but will the snow return to the forecast in the near future? We'll get an answer to that question coming up a little bit with Eric Hunt. Plus, this past week, Nebraska Extension hosted the 40th Annual Women in Agriculture Conference. Our team was on hand, and we'll share with you some of the topics that were discussed at that big gathering in Kearney. But we're starting today's show off with another important gathering that recently took place. That is the Eastern Nebraska Soil Health Conference. On this week's Conservation Corner, let's take a closer look at some of the climate-smart ag practices for the Corn Belt that were discussed at this annual event. Market Journal's Bill Dodd reports.
That we're supporting the idea, and then
during this year's Eastern Nebraska Soil Health Conference, there were several topics of discussion. Keynote speaker Dr. Lisa Schulte-Moore was on hand from Iowa State University to discuss climate-smart practices for producers in the Corn Belt. During her presentation, she discussed the importance of utilizing and incentivizing continuous living cover on the landscape and developing new sources of fertilization.
Yeah, so three things. One, talking about different ways that we can integrate continuous living cover on the landscape, because we know that that's really important in terms of just keeping our soils in place, protecting that soil resource. The second thing is looking at alternative sources of fertilization. And so the practice that we're looking at in the research is using digestate from a process called anaerobic digestion as a fertilizer, and being able to replace some of the more fossil-based fertilizer with a biofertilizer. And then the third thing is new ways of paying for some of these practices. And so looking at renewable energy as a way to both integrate continuous living cover on the farm as well as providing that digestate fertilizer.
One project that came up during the conference was the Grass to Gas Initiative. This multi-institutional project assesses ways in which perennials and winter crops can be used more widely as feedstock for anaerobic digestion. The novelty of this project lies in leveraging a successful business model based on the digestion of manure to encompass new agricultural feedstocks, more diverse products, and increased value throughout the supply chain.
And the basic idea of it is, again, trying to figure out ways to incentivize continuous living cover on the landscape. So the two ways we're looking at it is by strategically integrating in prairie restoration, so our native cover to this region. Like, we're not going to turn the whole farm back to prairie, but are there places on the farm where it makes sense, especially from the standpoint of either protecting or keeping our soils in place or regenerating soil. And then also looking at, we talk a lot about cover crops, but can we actually grow that cover crop a little bit longer and turn it into a winter crop? Harvest that plant material, use a process called anaerobic digestion, and turn that plant material into a gas. In this case, we're looking at turning that into methane, which can be upgraded to a renewable natural gas. It's chemically the same as what you would use in your stove or in your boiler. It can be, right now the incentives are as a transportation fuel, but also can look at it for, say, home heating purposes and other more industrial purposes.
Another topic of discussion that stood out was the study and effective use of prairie strips. The basic idea is utilizing native plant species that are well adapted to the area, utilizing those plants to improve soils and water management in ecosystems that are currently dominated by corn and soybean rotations.
The idea is you don't have to turn it all back to prairie, but again, can we put a little bit back in and be really smart about where we put it and what are the benefits? The research my teams and I have done shows that if you put a little bit in, you have dramatic benefits. What we studied is, and this was in a more sloping landscape, but when you put 10% of the area into prairie strips, you keep 95% more of that soil in the area. We retain 77% of the phosphorus, 70% of the nitrogen. We double the birds using that area. We triple the pollinators using that area. We improve water infiltration. We help keep manure out of we keep it in the farm field, we keep it out of the water. We keep some of the pesticides in the crop environment and out of our water as well. The list of benefits just goes on. And so what we say is, like, these small changes, has big impacts, right? But I recognize that 10% is not small, which is what gets us to grass to gas. Like, if we want to have all these benefits, right, how do we pay for it?
A farmer's number one resource is their soil. By adopting certain practices, producers can help ensure that the soil they are utilizing today will remain in good condition for future generations. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.